Good afternoon, and welcome to the first webinar on autonomous mobility, hosted by the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. We are excited to have you join us today. My name is Greer Gillis, and I am JTA Senior Vice President and Chief Infrastructure and Development Officer. And this afternoon, I'll serve as your moderator for episode number 1, Autonomous Mobility Disruptors. Before I move to introduce our speakers, let me give you a brief overview of our topics for today, starting with how autonomous vehicles can solve our community's needs and challenges. Community needs and challenges they're trying to solve. The benefits regarding safety, sustainability, and technology, and more. And the regulatory issues and the historic opportunity for the U.S. to lead in the advancement and deployment of autonomous vehicles. Furthermore, you'll hear from our 4 leaders, or as I call them, autonomous mobility disruptors. They are leading the industry in deploying autonomous vehicles in their communities to advance mobility options for all of its residents. Today's webinar will be an interactive session where you will hear from each panelist, and then we will enter into a question and answer session. Please submit any questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom window. We will answer as many questions as our time permits. Stay tuned until the very end for a wrap-up of ideas presented by our panelists and for a preview of episode 2 of our webinar series. But now, let me introduce to you our esteemed panelists. First, Nathaniel Ford Sr., CEO of the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. Nathaniel P. Ford Sr. is an award-winning transportation expert and leading advocate for how autonomous vehicles and other advances can be used to improve the quality of life for travelers throughout the nation. He has a proven track record as a change agent and visionary who embraces state-of-the-art technology and innovation. His career spans nearly 4 decades, and he recently celebrated his 10th anniversary at the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. Ford is a champion of multimodal transportation, walkable neighborhoods, public-private partnerships, and transit-oriented development. And he is known for industry-leading insights and thought leadership on international transportation issues from trade and study missions from around the world. And we are happy and proud to have Mr. Ford join us today. Next, we have M.J. Maynard, CEO of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, or RTC. The RTC is the only agency nationwide responsible for public transportation, traffic management, roadway and construction funding, and regional and transportation planning. MJ proudly leads the RTC with 16 years of transportation experience and 25 years of hospitality experience to ensure that Southern Nevada continues to build a world-class, sustainable, and multimodal transportation system that serves as a connector of the region's business sector, its residents, and 40+ million annual visitors. Her embrace of technology has made RTC one of the most technologically advanced transportation agencies in the country. MJ, welcome to our webinar series. Next, we have Ms. Kimberly Williams, Chief Innovation Officer of the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County in Houston, Texas. Kimberly heads up the Office of Innovation for the Metropolitan Transit Authority in Houston, Texas. In her time at Metro, she led the implementation of Houston's first autonomous vehicle shuttle service and deployed public-private partnerships to begin Wi-Fi service on the transit and Metro's new microtransit service, Curb to Curb. She is active in the industry as a member of the American Public Transportation Association's Board of Directors and sits on multiple committees. Kimberly is also a graduate of Leadership APTA, Senior Transit Executive, and Transportation for America's Smart City programs. Kimberly, welcome to our program. And then last, we have Tim Haile, Executive Director of Contra Costa Transit Authority. Tim serves as the authority's Executive Director with more than 23 years of experience in program management, public works, and transportation projects. He is a registered professional engineer and earned his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from California Polytechnic State University. He has been an active leader in the transportation industry and community, serving as the communications chair of the Transportation Research Board's Managed Lane Committee and board member of the California Transportation Foundation. In 2014, he was named one of the top 20 under 40 engineering professionals in California by Engineering News Record magazine. Tim, it's a pleasure to have you here. So now, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and allowing us to hear your thoughts and ideas on autonomous mobility. I'd like to start opening remarks with Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Greer. And before I deliver my opening remarks, let me say thank you to my colleagues for accepting to be part of this first episode of an AV webinar series that the JTA is hosting. In my career, I've been known to challenge my peers to hold and be bold of action, making opportunities out of challenges and building for the future with the greater good of our communities in our minds. And my colleagues on this panel are just that. They're clearly bold thought leaders of our industry. And why do we want to do this? I've often said that AVs are not a question of if, but a question of when. No industry is immune to disruption. And I think many of us take for granted the automobiles that we drive or the steam engines of the past, and how automobiles, starting out with the Model T, actually disrupted our communities and our cities for generations to come. And I'm sure that there was a fair share of skeptics during the beginning of those implementations, but both of those innovations, I think you would agree, transformed the world of transportation and beyond. I personally got a chance to see disruption firsthand. Prior to serving as the CEO of the JTA, I served as the CEO of the San Francisco MTA. And at some point during that journey, we took over the responsibility for regulation over taxis in that community. And so it came under our purview, and it came to during a time when clearly technology was advancing, GPS tracking, credit card utilization, mobile credit card utilization as a payment option. And this heightened the need for us in San Francisco to encourage the taxi industry to adopt these new technologies. Unfortunately, that didn't happen soon enough. And in face of that need, a technology company launched in San Francisco an app that connected drivers to riders with pickup and drop-off location identification, as well as an online payment system, and it revolutionized the taxi industry as we know it. This company was Uber, and I got a chance to have a front row seat to see how technology deployed appropriately and introduced appropriately could actually change mobility in our community. We are in an era of mass urbanization and ever-increasing markets for efficient and future-proof mobility solutions. The adoption of autonomous and driverless vehicles into public transportation networks clearly is emerging as a promising path to help us reshape urban landscapes, as well as help improve the quality of life in rural communities. And as our nation is grappling with the challenges posed by congestion, pollution, and accessibility, the prospect of AVs in public transportation offers an exciting vision of streamlined, sustainable, and inclusive mobility. The path to integrating autonomous vehicles into our communities is a challenging task, but I think it's one that we need to embrace as mobility integrators. I believe that as an industry leader, we do not need to be followers of the pack or observers on the sidelines. As this mobility disruption occurs, it is our responsibility to take the road less traveled and look at holistic networks of mobility and connectivity that are sustainable, that are equitable and seamless. And I think autonomous vehicles are a solution that will provide us with achieving those goals. So back in 2016, the JTA Board of Directors directed the JTA staff and our leadership team to not only keep and modernize our existing Skyway, automated people mover that was built in downtown Jacksonville about 30 years ago. We recognized that autonomous vehicles were the perfect solution to modernize our 2.5-mile aerial structure, but more importantly, fulfill the original promise of the Skyway, which was a fully integrated 10-mile autonomous vehicle system, and which was built back in the 1970s. That 10-mile potential can only be reached through autonomous vehicles. And that was our path, and it is our strategy to revitalize this infrastructure. And out of that effort came the ultimate urban circulator, also known to many as the U2C. In 2019, the JTA was fortunate to secure a $12.5 million build grant from US DOT, the first major federal funding commitment to an autonomous vehicle program of its size. And MJ, congratulations, you were part of that build grant award program at that time to set your project in motion. This award set in motion for the JTA phase 1 of the U2C, which is known as the Bay Street Innovation Corridor. And we are also receiving a $13 million match from the Florida Department of Transportation. Since then, we have secured other federal and local commitments to actually go into phase 2 of the project, which is the big lift, conversion of the elevated structure into an autonomous vehicle roadway. And then phase 3, fully mobilizing a 10-mile system in our community, connecting adjacent communities to our downtown core. So again, not a question of if, it's really a question of when. Bay Street Innovation Corridor is now on schedule. It's currently at 60% design, and it's on path to be in passenger service in 2025. And the complete U2C version will significantly expand our network into the downtown adjoining communities. The completed project, passengers will now be able to go to our sports and entertainment complex, dining, retail, residential nodes in our community, and actually cross the St. Johns River, as well as link 2 major medical complexes on each side of our downtown core. But there are more benefits that we can present on our project. We believe that the future of industry is on our ability to be sustainable. These vehicles obviously will be electric, and then also there will be additional advancements in technology and innovation. The possibilities that we will now have in public transportation to present first and last mile connectivity, one of the major hurdles for our industry, will now be able to be achieved using AVs and deploying them in those less dense communities. We are also dealing with the workforce impacts. So we are training and preparing our workforce of tomorrow and demonstrating to future generations the viability of our industry as a career path, using a connection between STEM learning in our Duval County Public Schools as it relates to the U2C project. It's helping us also to look at alternative services in our changing market. Major manufacturing companies are currently moving forward with plans to set up shop here in the US. My colleagues on this panel, we all know there is not a US-built, Buy America compliant vehicle, autonomous vehicle manufacturer at this time. We are actually in conversations with a number of foreign firms that are interested in setting up shop in the United States and building these vehicles, not just for the US and North America market, but also looking at how they can build the vehicles here and import them overseas from a financial standpoint. But they need to see that there's a market and a workforce here in the US. And that's why I think these webinars are going to be so important. It shows not just this futuristic concept, but it also will show the realistic impacts to our transportation services in our communities, as well as the jobs that will be created as a result of these technology projects. I look forward to the discussion with my colleagues on how we can continue to be bold of action. I thank them for their bold and courageous leadership by entering into this AV space. As we were talking in preparation, this isn't for the faint of heart, but the objective and the goals are so rewarding. And I want to applaud each and every one of you for participating in this webinar and leading in your community to provide world-class transportation infrastructure. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Greer. And again, thank you everyone for joining us, the audience, as well as my colleagues on this panel.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Ford. We truly appreciate your remarks. Next, we'll turn it over to Ms. Maynard for her opening remarks.
I think she's
Ms.
on.
Maynard, would you please unmute?
You would think after all this, how many years we've been virtual that you, okay, let me start over. I said, thank you, Greer. And thanks to Nat. You know, I agree with everything you said, Nat. This is not for the faint of heart. But I will tell you, this is also, at least here in Las Vegas, we've been in this space for quite a while. You know, back in 2017, in partnership with the private sector, AAA, Gillis, City of Las Vegas, and the RTC, we implemented the first autonomous vehicle shuttle in downtown Las Vegas that operated in mixed flow traffic. And it was an opportunity, you know, as Greer mentioned, there's millions of visitors that come to Las Vegas every year. They had a chance to see this technology, you know, up front, up close, in person. And I think a lot of that, if there's a hesitancy, it's because if you don't know what you don't know, many times there's a fear in potentially entering into this new space. But not only have the autonomous vehicle pilot in downtown Las Vegas, certainly we had tourists that would, you know, move their husband aside to take a selfie with the vehicle. They rode in it, and I think it quelled some fears. And then we here in Las Vegas today, since 2017, Motional, formerly of Aptiv, has been in partnership with Lyft, operating autonomous vehicle autonomous vehicle service to thousands of customers. And from what I'm understanding from Motional, you know, the customers that have ridden in this service, they score very highly. They feel very safe. And so for the RTC to go after a build grant, I don't think it raised a lot of eyebrows, because we've been here in Las Vegas. Again, autonomous technology has been around and it's been operating on roadways for a very long time. We have a company called Neuro that is going to be operating delivery service vehicles here. So I say that when we do, again, we were very lucky to get the $5.3 million in the build grant. Our AV program is different. I think, Nat, I've said this to you. If you've seen one AV program, you've seen one AV program. They really are very different depending on the city that it operates in, depending on the audience that you're going after, the customer that you're going after, and the technology that you're looking to implement. And so for our program, it's we're calling it GoMed. It's going to be an autonomous vehicle that operates in downtown Las Vegas from our busiest transit hub, the Bonneville Transit Center. It will travel to and from and within the Las Vegas Medical District. And so a lot of the customers that we'll be serving will be from the vulnerable population, whether it's seniors or people with disabilities, as a complement to some of the fixed route services that we operate in that area. But this almost 700-acre district has 4 hospitals. It's got UNLV's medical school. We see a need, an important need, to connect again this vulnerable population to medical appointments, to employment. And so our vehicle will be operating in mixed flow traffic. It will be, it will obey the posted speed limit signs. It's not necessarily going to be the smaller Navia shuttle, I think, that we saw here originally in Las Vegas. It will be more of your traditional sort of paratransit type vehicle. But very excited to, again, this is not a pilot. The build grant was a program. I will tell you that we would have been, if not for the pandemic, we would have been in operation already. It was planned for this year. So it's pushed us back a couple of years, but we are very excited about the opportunity to continue in the spirit of Las Vegas and what we do here in Southern Nevada, to lean into technology, to lean into areas that we can learn, and more importantly, to continue to partner with the private sector. I think transit systems can't do this alone. I think it's very important that we're using the smarts, and sometimes the private sector has the ability to, they're not as risk averse as we are. So we've learned a lot from our partners here in Southern Nevada as we prepare to implement our GoMed autonomous vehicle program.
Ms. Maynard, thank you. Thank you for your remarks and also sharing your journey. Next, we'll turn over to Ms. Williams from Houston Metro to share with us her opening remarks. Ms. Williams.
Thank you so much, Greer. Appreciate it. And Nat, thank you so much for convening this webinar today and having this conversation. It's good to share experiences with our colleagues. This is definitely a journey. And it definitely is not without its challenges, but it also has a tremendous amount of opportunities. So as mentioned, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Houston Metro. For those of you who are not familiar with Houston, we are the fourth largest city in the US, and Metro is the regional transportation provider. We also recently had voter approval for a significant bond program that will be carried out over the next 20 years. So it was important for us for a number of reasons to start looking at everything in the toolkit. And we see autonomous vehicles being very much a part of that conversation. And I will say Texas as a whole does as well. In 2016, Texas made autonomous vehicles completely legal in the state with very little regulation. So at that time, we thought it was important for us to really learn all of we could about the technology, not just from an operational standpoint, from our using it, but also what the experience would be like for our operators having vehicles in their environment. So similar to Nat, to MJ, we have Neuro in our environment, which is an autonomous grocery delivery firm. We also will soon have Cruise, which is an autonomous robo-taxi company. I think Nat mentioned the transition of the taxi companies when he was in San Francisco, where our taxi company actually went out of business last year. So in other words, the future is here. You're seeing these autonomous vehicle deployments all over, and it would be short-sighted of us not to look at how this opportunity plays in public transit. So Houston Metro stood up its autonomous vehicle program in 2017, shortly after the Texas law was enacted. And in 2019, we launched our first low-speed autonomous shuttle project. It was a last and first mile project in an underserved community in Houston, and it was on the campus of Texas Southern University. It was our way of introducing and educating the public about the opportunities with autonomous vehicles and autonomous shuttle services. And so we were excited to be the first to launch in Houston, being the public transit agency. And that was a successful program. We operated 7,000 trips on campus. And fortunately, due to the pandemic, we had to conclude that program. But in 21, we received a grant from FTA. It was not the build grant, it was the Accelerating Innovative Mobility, known as AIM grant, that we had to deploy what will be our phase 2. And similar to MJ, that will be a mid-size shuttle. That will be a retrofit where we take an existing compliant shuttle and apply driverless technology to it. And so I'm excited that that project will launch in January 2024. So we're excited to see that progress happen. In addition to our autonomous vehicle program, low speed shuttle, as I mentioned, we'll have that mixed traffic full speed shuttle coming online in January. We are also a part of the Automated Bus Consortium. And that is a collective of about 12 combination of transit and DOT agencies who are looking to develop a full speed, full size autonomous electric bus. And we see this application being most suitable for bus rapid transit lines, which we're seeing more and more agencies around the country implement. And we feel like this technology is ideal for that use case. And so we're excited to be a part of that initiative, and that will go out for bid in January or first quarter of 24. So we're seeing things move along. We are also members of a new consortium called ACES, Automated Connected Electric Shared technology that can be used to scale across transit agencies and other use cases. And so I think with ACES, what we're focused on is really educating people, helping them better understand the opportunities with AVs, and then also the just huge number of benefits from mobility to workforce that this technology brings. And I think just in closing, I want to say, a lot of our projects, our infrastructure projects, are accomplish over 13 to 20-year windows. We have to look to the future. We have to understand this technology, because the planning for something that happens today won't actually be in your environment till that time frame in the future. So we have to start thinking about what mobility looks like to take the best advantage of the resources that we have today to make sure that we're providing that service of the future. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleagues as well as we continue this conversation. So thank you, Greer. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and appreciate the context that you provided in your remarks. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Mr. Haile, I will turn the virtual floor over to you, sir, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Greer, and thank you, Nat, for inviting me and allowing me to be part of this panel and this webinar. Really exciting to hear about all the great projects that everyone's doing, and I think we need to do more of this in terms of collaboration and working together. And I think, and to Kimberly's point, that was the whole reason CCTA is also a member of this ACES coalition. And I think all of us are actually members of this ACES coalition. And I think that the whole idea was to bring us all together to really talk about a lot of the challenges that we're faced on improving and moving forward in this space. You know, for example, public acceptance, we're seeing that in San Francisco right now in terms of techlash, you know, on Cruise and Waymo in San Francisco, and I'm sure in other communities soon. But we're also seeing, you know, some of the challenges in terms of scalability with workforce development. And then I think the third element, which we all are going to talk a lot about today, is on the regulatory side. And on the regulatory side, you know, things like Buy America, purpose-built vehicle standards, safety standards, and, you know, really looking forward to what NHTSA is going to be doing with the AV STEP program. And I'm sure we'll talk about that today. But I think in terms of Contra Costa Transportation Authority, you know, we were really faced with a first and last mile challenge here in Contra Costa County. CCTA is a self-help county. We're a very small agency, or about 25 people here in the agency, and we are faced with managing congestion in Contra Costa County with about 1.2 million people. And so we started our innovation program back in 2014 through the development and the creation of Gomentum Station. And Gomentum Station is one of the largest secure autonomous vehicle test beds in the country, and it's very popular with our Silicon Valley OEM test partners, as well as others across the nation. And it's also where we learn and form partnerships to develop a lot of our projects. And I think we've learned a lot, including, you know, our first deployment was an Easy Mile shuttle. We were right behind MJ in Las Vegas. So we deployed a Easy Mile shuttle, low speed autonomous, shared autonomous shuttle on public roads in California in late 2017, November of 2017, right behind MJ. And we learned a lot from that project, and we've been developing projects ever since then. We were fortunate to work with and get a grant from US DOT and FHWA for an ATC and TD grant for a mobility as a service platform, which included the deployment of a low-speed shared autonomous vehicle in a business district, in a business facility. And it's about the size of Disneyland, and we're currently operating it today, Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 5:30. It's open to the public, it's free. And we're getting a lot of interest, a lot of ridership. About 450 people per week are riding that shuttle. And it just shows you that there's a need, you know, for this technology and in this space. And then we were also fortunate to get a grant in 2019 by FTA, one of the 8 automated driving system grants, and that is for the development of 3 projects. And I'm happy to say that we're going to be deploying those projects early next year. But one of them is a low-speed shared autonomous shuttle in a senior community center, really helping this community with the average age of 77 to be able to continue their quality of life and be able to move around and get around within their community, the community center, the grocery store. And then the second project is a ADA compliant, wheelchair accessible, autonomous level 3 shuttle that we're working on. And that project is going to be deployed early next year, open to the public as well. And we really wanted to solve a problem with that project in terms of a growing rate of absenteeism to medical appointments at the county hospital. And then the third project is actually a pilot. And that project is with Nissan, UC Berkeley Path, AWS, Verizon. And we're basically looking at how we can use connected autonomous vehicles to help improve congestion on a freeway, on I-680. And then lastly, we just completed a P3 procurement, very similar to what Nat did in JTA with their UTC, but it's a 28-mile closed network of autonomous vehicles. We selected a company, the P3 consortium is Plenary, Glideways, and Flatiron. And so we're working with them to develop this 28-mile network, but really to connect 4 disadvantaged communities together that do not have access to transportation. And I think the theme in our entire program is to, excuse me, is to really focus on use cases, right? How can we use this technology to solve problems and use cases? And that's the really important thing I think that everyone needs to learn is it's not about the technology, it's about how we're using technology to solve the problem. And so, and I'm excited to work with our partners. We're working with Beep on the Rossmore project, as well as the Bishop Ranch project. We're working with Maine Mobility on the county hospital project. And then, as I mentioned, Glideways and Plenary and Flatiron on the what we call the dynamic personal microtransit project. And I think through all of this work, if you want to learn more about what we're doing at CCTA, I just started a podcast called On the Patio. It's available wherever you get our podcasts, and I release episodes every 2 weeks to talk about what we're doing here at CCTA, and you can tune in and learn more what we're doing here at CCTA, and really excited for the conversation and looking forward to being part of the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Haile, and thank you all for your opening remarks. They were very rich and very insightful, and it really lays the foundation for our discussion that will ensue very shortly. So to all who are listening in, we have some bold thought leaders here with us, and they've taken a step forward in what some could say is an uncharted territory. And they're advancing autonomous vehicle technology and demonstrating with their programs how they can advance mobility for our communities and support our industry becoming a sustainable one. So I'd like to get into some big ideas with our panelists so that we can open up this conversation. So let's get started with our first question. This question actually goes to you, Nat. So the U2C has garnered national and international attention. In your time leading that project, what would you like to see more of to advance policy on automated vehicles in the United States? And how do you see AV, autonomous vehicles, leading in the public transportation space? What say you, sir?
All right, thank you, Greer. You know, I think it's clear we need to continue focusing on our engagement with the policymakers. And let me start from the top by saying, you know, NHTSA, FTA, US DOT, they have been working with us step by step in terms of delivering this project because it's new for all of us. And I think, you know, the oversight of the deployment of these systems, be it the technology, the vehicles, our industry as a whole, we're all learning as we are building these projects and programs. I think that collaboration, particularly now, is foundational. We are setting standards and we need to develop regulations that are going to help us govern how these vehicles are going to be deployed, particularly in the public transportation space. But I do think it's important that we do set some goals and milestones. As I mentioned earlier, you know, we received a build grant from the US DOT for the Bay Street Innovation Corridor, and that grant led to the JTA and the FTA, who is now the agency administering that grant, to sign grant agreements that include certain milestones that I need to deliver upon. So, and just to give you an example, you know, we are working very closely with NHTSA relating to, you know, exemptions on our vehicles. If we were to do a purpose-built vehicle, right now, any roadworthy vehicle is required to have a steering wheel, brake pedal, gas pedal, and a whole host of other things that an AV doesn't really require, but they are required per definition of a vehicle that is roadworthy. So we've got to work with NHTSA to develop these clear rulemaking decisions that will permit us to reach these milestones. Otherwise, I actually will default on the US DOT grant if I'm not able to make these decisions in a timely fashion. So let me, again, reiterate all of the agencies involved, NHTSA and FTA, we're working together diligently, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that these systems are safe and that the security and safety of our riders are at the forefront. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think the technology, which is constantly evolving and clearly will transform our communities, is so critical in helping our economy grow. But it's just that the technology is a bit ahead of some of the rulemaking and the policy making that needs to be in place so we can meet our milestones. One of the things that we're dealing with right now, and I think all of you are dealing with, is, and I mentioned it earlier in my opening remarks, is Buy America. With no US manufacturers in the US producing these types of shuttles, and we've seen many of these shuttles across the globe, we need to look at potentially exemptions for initial launches. And then as we create this market and these foreign firms then set up shop in the US, obviously we can replace these vehicles with vehicles that are built by Americans here in the United States with the appropriate amount of US built componentry to be part of that vehicle. So I just want to go back to, it's critical that we get all of these policies right. We do want to move forward very quickly to deploy these systems that will improve the quality of life in our communities with accessibility in a number of fronts, but we've got to do it safely. We just need the policies to be in place to allow us to move forward. I think the technology is important, just as important as the ecosystem we build around it, and it has an indirect positive impact on our way of life. So new jobs, reinventing or elevating the quality of our workforce is important, and Buy America is extremely important. And but we also want to build America as we go through these processes. So with that, Greer, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the response, Mr. Ford. MJ, similar to the JTA, you have also received the Build grant. RTC received one as well in 2018 for your autonomous circulator that you mentioned in your opening remarks. Let me ask you this question. How does your project help Southern Nevada's most vulnerable populations, such as the elderly and the disabled? And can this be a benefit that's replicated in autonomous vehicle deployments throughout our nation?
Thanks for the question. I think I'm going to start at the, I'll answer towards the end of your question, because I think it's really important that you have that buy-in in your community. When you do something different, particularly around autonomous vehicle technology, if you don't have, first of all, the regulations in place, and similar to Kim in the state of Texas and probably Florida, we were part of ensuring that there was the appropriate regulations set in place to allow this technology to be implemented on public roadways. And it's important that your I report to a board of elected officials. It's important that you get buy-in in terms of what we're trying to solve for. And again, because Southern Nevada has been home to AV technology since 2016, the evolution is again part of what we do here. And so to answer more specifically in terms of the vulnerable population, I think as Tim mentioned, he's got a first mile, last mile, or he's got a program that's operating in the senior community. So we've heard from our disabled community that they're looking for equity, and they're looking for ways to move about and have the same opportunities as folks that are able-bodied. And I think as the technology continues to advance, as we learn from the type of circulator that we're going to be operating, again, it's in downtown Las Vegas. There are 4 hospitals that serve nearly 200,000 patients a year. We'll be connecting folks that from the downtown area to this campus in an area that, quite frankly, is not safety is a big part of this, right? Ensuring that folks that again that are elderly or disabled, it's looking for those advantages. So I do think, again, it can be replicated for sure, but it has to fit in a community that is accepting of that, and you have to have the regulations in place. And so I think you're going to find opportunities with autonomous vehicle technology, particularly in senior communities, first and last mile options. And I think around this large campus, that will be connecting folks to these medical appointments. And again, we're not using the small, slow speed vehicle. This is a vehicle that has to operate in mixed flow traffic. It has to obey the posted speed limits. And so I think because it's this sort of real world opportunity, again, it's not a pilot program, we'll be able to share our best practices, what we're learning with our peers. And I think to Nat's point, the autonomous vehicle technology is not a matter of if, it really is when. And I think we have an opportunity to apply for federal grants, to work with the private sector, to get smart about this technology. It only will open the door for further opportunities. And we're pretty excited about the opportunity to, again, provide a level of independence and equity to our seniors and our disabled community here in Southern Nevada. So thanks for the question. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Well, we love that about the accessibility and the equity, providing that for your community. Thank you. Kim, Houston Metro is riding into the future with autonomous shuttle service to Texas Southern University, Houston's 3rd Ward, and the University of Houston. As you could say that Houston Metro is building the ridership of the future. But with that being said, what are the benefits of having an AV deployment in these educational zones? And what positive impact has it had on building the workforce of the future?
Well, Greer, thank you so much for that question. And that is certainly a big consideration when we pick the area. We do have a section of the city where we have 2 universities that sit literally across the street from each other, sharing a major thoroughfare. Texas Southern University is a historically Black college university. And then across the street is University of Houston, which is a Carnegie level research institution of about 40,000 students. So I think the biggest benefit for us in working with the 2 universities was the opportunity to expose to students. We had research commission as a part of the project. And so there were students who were actively engaged in collecting the data, analyzing data, performing reports, and even doing checks and balances on the vehicle as it started the day or during breaks or at the end of the day. So it gave them the reality that this technology is here, right? It's not something out in the distance. It's not the Jetsons. It's right outside your classroom and you're working on this. And so that was amazing to see, to be able to educate the community. Also in the same area near the 2 universities is the largest public housing facility in Houston, known as CUNY Homes. And it is a significant, large facility, and students had a chance to also use the service, and we'll have even more of a chance when we launch throughout the community in January. And so being able to expose young people to this technology, that it's here, like what's involved with it, what things you need to know about it, I think has definitely been a huge benefit. Jack Yates High School is also there as well. So we definitely have that opportunity to touch and feel from everywhere from seniors, right, to high schoolers to college students. And what we've seen generate from that is one of our local community colleges has actually developed a certification program for an autonomous vehicle operator. I'm not sure how many programs like that exist in the country, but the fact that they have this program and they actually have potential employers who are ready to employ those students is important. And I think also it's important to remember that at its base, autonomous vehicles are typically electric vehicles. And whether you're interested in electrification or autonomy, that industry is here, it's now, they're looking for people. So as you develop that skill set for electric vehicles, it translates very easily over to automation. And so I think those are important things for people to know. And I would also say, connecting people to education. This was a first and last mile use case. And as I mentioned, we have 2 universities and everybody remembers what it's like to be a starving college student, right? And so being able to provide a service that connects people in that community to those educational opportunities is very important. I mean, I think it just so happens we all are in hot environments, right? but I think the high today is 106, right? That's no fun. Walking to your nearest bus stop or your nearest light rail station. And so being able to have that first and last mile connection is critical, especially when you're talking about someone who's elderly, when you talk about someone who has accessibility or mobility challenges. Stepping out in that heat is just not an option, right? But this does give them options. And I think that's important. So we realized a lot of benefits, and we're looking to realize even more as we advance the program going forward. And I think just to echo, it's about accessibility, it's about mobility, and it is about opportunity.
And I loved how you did that, creating that opportunity with the students of today that would be the workforce of tomorrow. We did something similar like that here in Florida at Florida State College in Jacksonville. And it's amazing how the college students really embrace this new technology, probably a lot faster than one of us before we got into this industry. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So Tim, with everything you have going on at Contra Costa, you have 6 projects that make up your innovative 680 program. And then, as you mentioned earlier, in 2019, you received funding from USDOT to conduct 3 pilot projects. But tell us this, from the data and the experience of your pilots and your programs, what are 2 or 3 items you would like to see in a national roadmap for a scale deployment of automation throughout the nation?
Well, I know we have a question about this that we're going to be talking about, the entire group. So maybe I'll keep it brief and save it for the discussion. But as you mentioned with the automated driving system grant, one of the key components of that grant and requirement of that grant was collecting data directly out of autonomous vehicles. And so I think that been some of those biggest challenges that we've been facing on the project. And particularly around, trying to capture data around how to measure safety around these vehicles. And being able to tap in directly, into the bus, into the computer, to be able to get that information. And so I think in terms of a national roadmap, I think we should have the ability to have more data sharing between both the public sector and the private sector. I think that would be really, really important. I think also something that we're also looking at in terms of our experiences is obviously we're doing a lot of things around these purpose-built vehicles, like similar to everyone around here on the webinar. And I think, having a national safety framework around how to move, purpose-built vehicles forward, I think is going to be really, really key in a national framework, and how to address the challenges around, and this is going to be a buzzword, we're going to keep talking about it, but Buy America, ADA, all of those things with these purpose-built vehicles, and making sure that there's a process, like a regulatory process. Right now, we're all working under the Part 55 exemptions. And so how do we create standards and streamline that process, so we can really give the private sector really the ability to scale, right? Like having the trust and as well as the confidence, in the standards, so that they can start scaling. And to Nat's point, they can start actually coming to the United States and actually have the faith to actually manufacture vehicles here in the United States, because we have lack of standards, we can't scale, right? And so I think scalability and standards are really, really important. And then I would say the other key component of the national framework would be workforce development. I know we're going to talk about more of that, but I think more support from USDOT, FTA in terms of funding for workforce development programs. And we can talk about more about that. And I think the other thing on the national road framework that we're also seeing is making sure there's clear understanding the differences between the driver and the vehicle. And from a driver perspective, making sure that we're coordinating that with the state regulations and understanding how that's going to fit into state regulations. And then, as Nat mentioned earlier, when you start taking the steering wheel, the brake pedal, the gas pedal out, what are those standards going to be? So, I mean, there's a lot there. I could talk all day on this subject, but I know we got more to talk about. But thanks for the question.
Of course. You're right. We're down to an hour here, and you're right. We could talk all day. But let's open this up a little bit. I'm going to throw some questions out, and then we're going to take a moment to grab a question from the participants, our audience joining us. Let me ask this first question, and anyone can join in. What have you found as the most successful stories to share about why automation is so critical to our cities, communities, and economies? And how does this technology support the riders as well as the community? Who'd like to jump in on that one? Mr. Ford?
Hey, just real quickly, Greer, one of the projects that I think we are most proud of here in Jacksonville was deploying our autonomous vehicle fleet on the Mayo Clinic's campus in Jacksonville during the COVID-19 pandemic. We had the opportunity in level 4 operation with no driver to actually move COVID-19 test samples from their drive-through testing site to the hospital laboratories, about a mile. And we did that at level 4. And, just for the agency to fulfill its commitment to this community and help our community survive this pandemic, and being able to use autonomous vehicle technology to help support our health, the heroes that were working in the health industry and on the Mayo campus, was something that we were extremely proud of. During that time frame, we moved over 30,000 test samples between the drive-through testing and the laboratory. And we were just so honored to get an international award from the ITS World Congress in Germany. And so that's something that I will always be extremely proud of in terms of our work with autonomous vehicles. And then just real quickly, the partnership we have with Duval County Public Schools, where we actually take our vehicles to elementary, middle school, and high schools, so that they're able to get on our vehicles, learn about the technology, learn about the jobs in this industry, and to also spur on their interest in STEM. And we just are so excited about being able to do that work and support of the young people and their careers coming forward, and just to be there at one of those events and see their interest and their smiles and their very tough questions related to these technologies and what they will experience in their lives is really great and heartwarming and rewarding.
Greer, I'd like to jump in. Listen, I think certainly here in Las Vegas, we have to use sort of our leverage, and that is we are this repository of customers from all over the world. And I think part of the success has been the fact that we've been operating autonomous vehicles here in Southern Nevada for a number of years now. And I think there's that whole fear of the unknown. And if you don't get a chance to see the technology in real time, that's really been the feedback that we've heard from Motional, that has provided thousands of trips since 2017. It's seen it, it's feeling it, it's touching it. And so that, I think, has been a huge success here, because we've had an opportunity not just to show our community what the technology could do, what it feels like, how it drives, but to have tourists from all over the world get a chance to experience that as well, because I think that knowledge is power. But I will say, I think there's future success stories to tell. Safety is a big deal here in Southern Nevada. We have probably one of the highest pedestrian vehicle fatality rates. Autonomous vehicles don't drive drunk. They don't text and drive. They don't have road rage. They don't rush to work or get sleepy. And I think, just in the Las Vegas area last year, there were 22,000 accidents, or almost 56 a day. That's just in the Las Vegas area. So I think the future success stories for car-centric communities like Southern Nevada is going to be what autonomous vehicle technology can do. Not only it comes to serving vulnerable populations and providing that equity and that independence, but also providing a safer environment. And I think that's something that we will follow. We'll follow the stats, and that's something I think that we'll continue to share, not only at the federal level, but also at the local level. And I think you'll find more adoption of AV technology, because safety is such a big deal.
And Greer, if I could chime in on that question, I think the thing that we saw with our project, the area we chose to operate in is an area that has experienced a lot of disinvestment over the years. The infrastructure in terms of the sidewalks, accessibility are a challenge. And I think our project gave, I mentioned the different communities that are in and around that area. It gave them another mobility option that allowed them to manage that situation and connect to transit and connect to locations in their community that they may not have access prior to because just the difficulty of getting there. And you know, when you have a city as large and as old as Houston, you know, infrastructure, you know, is an issue, adequate sidewalks, adequate ramps, adequate accessibility. And I think the AV technology gives you a tool that can be used to address that.
Yeah, Greer, if I could just quickly, I want to just echo everyone's comments around, you know, STEM, education, you know, public acceptance, touch and feel, equity. I think those are all really extremely important. And I think for me, I think the also kind of future success I see here is how this technology can really support public transportation.
Right.
I think from a transit perspective, I know a lot of transit agencies are really facing a lot of challenges right now. And how can this technology really support the future about how to really not only provide effective service, but customer focused service that can really extend into the neighborhoods that we weren't able to get, you know, a 40-foot bus in, right? And so I think having these like low speed shuttles and micro transit opportunities and models, how does this technology really fit to really provide and feed and provide really important accessible transportation that people just didn't have before from an equity perspective, you know? And I think that's really important about this technology is how do we are addressing, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Good stuff, everyone. Good stuff. Now, time has escaped us, so we're getting closer to the end. So I'm going to jump to a big, heavy question for all of you as the last question on this group round. It's regulatory and practical. What thought leaders, what are some of the biggest roadblocks to wide-scale deployment of automation in the United States, and how can we overcome them? And then what can all of us, including our attendees who are listening today, what can all of us do to make progress in the deployment of autonomous vehicles in our nation?
So I'll jump in. I'll just say that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think for, you know, the stakeholders who are on this call and in our communities, this is important technology. It is a beneficial technology. And I think take the time to educate yourself on it, experience it, understand it, and support it. And I think those things would help kind of advance the conversation. There's some other regulatory things I'll bring up, but I think some of my colleagues will probably do that, so I'll defer to them. But thank you, Greer.
Welcome. MJ, I want to give you an opportunity to make a statement. I know you have a hard stop with us this afternoon, so anything you'd like to share before you have to leave us?
You know, I noticed there was a question that sort of alluded to the, you know, the infrastructure, and I'll tell you that is part of it. You can't put the cart before the horse. That is, you can certainly look to find the right form factor autonomous vehicle, but you've got it. It's so much more than that. And you have to be sure that you've got a partnership with the local jurisdictions, with the private sector, to ensure that the right technologies are in place. That roadway, whether it's roadside, the roadside units, or it's a connected vehicle to everything, kind of a DSRC, that dual approach. It's really important that there's a lot to think about, but we can't do it alone. And it will take that partnership, that spirit of partnership with the local jurisdictions to ensure that the roadways are ready to go, so that when the technology continues to advance, it's not oh wait, we totally forgot, we've got to go back and get the infrastructure in place. So you've got to make sure that's in place, and work with the private sector. You know, their job is to make money. Their job is they're certainly we need to make sure we're aware of how we can help them advance the technology and advance their investments so that it's something that we don't have to worry about Buy America compliant space in the future, because the opportunity is here in the United States for those companies, again, to manufacture the vehicles here in the United States. So it's all about partnership, and it's ensuring that you're thinking about everything that you need to operate these vehicles safely in your communities. And I want to say thanks so much to Nat. I look forward to future conversations. Kim and Tim, appreciate the partnership, and Greer, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks. And I do have an employee meeting, but I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks, MJ.
Okay.
Thanks, MJ. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, Greer, I'll jump in real quick because, MJ leaving, I wish she could have stayed to hear this. At the very beginning of this, we were kind of warming ourselves up, and MJ asked the question, Nat, what would success look like from your vantage point? And, I thought in starting this process of these webinars, it is really about advocacy and understanding. And one, amongst ourselves as public transportation organizations that are working and advancing these projects, there's opportunities for us to learn from each other. I think secondly, I think there's an opportunity with a larger audience for people to have an equal level of information. And what I've seen is there's various different levels of education and understanding of this technology and what it could bring to our communities. We started down this journey as the JTA because really we're looking at how we can optimize accessibility in our community, optimize accessibility to education, job opportunities, healthcare, things of that nature. So starting out with that big vision in mind and working through all of these challenges to get to that vision in the very end, that is the mission here. And I think, the better we move, the greater we become as a community, right? And so if we are able to move people around in the most efficient way, recognizing limited resources, limited real estate, and things of that nature, these autonomous vehicles give us ability to provide greater accessibility and move away from some of the, a 40-foot bus and, a 75-foot rail car, and really look at tailoring our services for the specific need, being much more surgical and precise in terms of the transportation needs in our community, and thereby lifting our community. We just happen to lift our community through transportation, and that's why I'm so bullish on autonomous vehicle technology as the 40-year veteran, why I think this is finally filling those gaps and those challenges that we endured for decades in terms of public transportation. With that, thank you, Greer.
Yeah, Greer, if I could just add 100%, Nat, I totally agree. And I think and I'll keep it brief because I know we're over time here, but I think it's really important in terms of addressing some of these roadblocks, right? So one is, public acceptance, right? Yeah. We're seeing that in terms of what's happening in Techlash and cities in San Francisco. And I think that's important in terms of really doing a lot of public outreach, public engagement, education. MJ talked about how do we get the public to touch and feel this technology, right? And I think that's really important to all of this. And I think also making sure we've got a coordinated approach, right? So, we talk a lot about a national framework, but we need a national framework, a state framework, and a local framework, right? We need to, at the county level at CCTA, we need to prepare our 19 cities for this technology, right? And how to address this technology. We are the experts, right? And how do we actually prepare our 19 cities? Because it's going to come. It's all coming to our cities. It's here, right? The technology's here. I would say the second thing is workforce development, right? And I think that's an important piece to be able to scale in a lot of different ways. And I think all of us, can see that as a big challenge in working with labor, working with unions, working with that group to really help them educate, especially the public sector. I think the public sector really plays an important role to really work with those groups to understand that this is not about losing jobs. This is actually about better jobs. This is about filling gaps. And there's a workforce development, transitional workforce that's really important to this conversation. And I think everyone needs to take that very seriously as we're kind of implementing these projects, because we tend to just focus on the technology, but there's all these institutional things that need to be addressed in terms of, what's the customer experience? What's the workforce
That's right.
development? I think the third thing in terms of the national as regulatory, we talked a lot about that today. And so I'm not going to cover that too much, but those are the three main roadblocks that I see. And I think it's important that we all come together, and I think that's what's really important about this ACES coalition, because this is the public sector getting together and having a conversation. Everyone probably is familiar with AVIA, which is really the private sector coalition, but there needed to be I'll say a sister coalition to that, to really bring all of us together, the people on this webinar, to really start promoting those three things, right? Public education, workforce development, regulatory framework, and really help guide the conversation. So if you really want to be part of that conversation, then go to acesmobility.org. This is not a sales pitch, but go to acesmobility.org and you can join that coalition to be part of this group right here to help shape that conversation, both at the federal level, the state level, and the local level.
All right, thank you, panelists. Sounds like we have delivered a call to action to the attendees of this webinar, and to all of you who have joined us, thank you for participating. Just so you are aware, with regards to your questions, although we've run out of time, we will definitely make sure that your questions reach our panelists and we could follow up with all of you. But then that also leads us to an opportunity to come back for our next episode. But before I leave you, let me share with you one of the takeaways from today's webinar is that call to action. So here's my call of action for all of you listening in today. Make your voice heard, support autonomous vehicle deployments, get engaged, get educated, and bring others along. Regardless of whether you are currently involved with an AV project or not, stay engaged and informed. Once scalability, acceptance, education, and deployment occur, this technology will be here to stay. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. With that, I invite you to continue to join the conversation around autonomous vehicles. More information will be coming soon in our next webinar series, where we will continue elevating the conversation of autonomous vehicles. We hope you will join us again and look forward to our next episode, episode number 2. With that, thank you everyone and have a wonderful rest of your day.